Well, today on the Practice of the Practice podcast, we have Kasey Compton, who has been on this podcast before. She has a $1 million plus practice and is on track to do $3 or maybe $5 million this year. You have such a huge, awesome laundry list that I know that our listeners, Kasey, listened to your previous podcast interview, and we got so much feedback that we're having you back on to do a 5-part series on how to build a $1 million practice. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited, actually. I'm really
I
excited.
know. I'm inspired. We just sketched out a mastermind for people that want $1 million practices, and I'm just like so geeked out about it.
I know. I love it. It's really kind of forced me to step back and break this down into more doable steps, and that's been fun.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what I love about your consulting. And even just when I hear you speak about your practice is I think if I wanted to do $1 million practice and stop doing consulting, you make it seem like it's so easy and doable to do that. It's just, if you follow these steps, like it's just super easy.
Well, it's really not. It's not super easy. It's not super easy, but it's definitely doable. Definitely.
Maybe it's just your kind of compassionate way you talk about it, that it seems like it's doable and realistic.
Maybe. One of my staff the other day, they were like, do you ever get stressed out? And I was just like, wow, I must be a really good faker because, it's doable and it's fun. It's just, I think a lot in your approach and your attitude towards it, seeing it as, just challenges and how am I going to overcome this one and so on. So.
Yeah, well, you have 5 different phases that we're going to go over these 5 different days. Why don't you give us a summary of the 5 phases and just kind of share with us a few of the steps that we see during those phases, and then we'll dive into the first one today. And then in the coming 4 podcasts, we will have you kind of go more in depth into the other 4. So maybe give us a summary of these 5 phases.
Okay. I tried to break this down in a lot of different ways. At first I thought, let me make these steps, and how many steps is it going to take to get someone really where they need to be, and started that way. And then last night just had a little bit of an epiphany and thought, I must really like P's, because everything that I was thinking of started with a P. So the 5 P's, I guess, would be the main one, and it's the one that I've been preaching a lot lately, is purpose. Sometimes we start a practice and we're so consumed with all of the nuts and the bolts and just running day to day that we can easily lose our purpose. And a big part of it is just knowing what your purpose is and what your passion is, and how you choose to impact your community. And I know that I talked the last time about purpose, and we talked about defining your why and why people should come to your company and why clinicians should want to work there. And so just clearly defining that through a lot of different ways, I think is often underestimated, but it's so important. So that would be the first one.
And then what's the second one? That's the one, our purpose, that we're going to really dive into after we get the overview. What's number 2?
2 is planning. Not in-depth planning at this point, really. Just more planning, doing your market research. If you're insurance-based, knowing your reimbursement rates, knowing your fee schedules, knowing what's allowable in your state. Are there certain codes that you can bill that can increase your revenue? What the cost of living is where you're from. What insurance do most people have? Just the basic planning can do wonders in a private practice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I see so often that people maybe start a practice and then they say, what have I got myself into? And some of those basic plannings of knowing your numbers, knowing some of the basics, it's not always fun to do, but it's necessary if you're going to scale, especially if you want to get to the level that you're at. Right,
definitely. Yeah, you definitely don't want to have to go back and do that 2 years in. That's something that needs to be done pretty soon.
Sure. So purpose, planning, then
one of my favorites would be process. I was reading about this again last night just to, just to get acclimated to it. And I think about it so much myself, and sometimes whenever I try to explain it to people, it can get a little muddy. So I was reading about it, and I was just thinking about the processes that we have at Mindsight, and the systems that we have, and how we preach process and systems so much. So in a private practice, in order to make it scalable, you have to have processes in place. And what your processes are going to do is increase your effectiveness. And so everything you're doing should be highly effective. And then looking at your systems, which will increase efficiency. So having a good balance of your processes and your systems are a huge component to a scalable practice.
Yeah, I know one thing that when I talk to people that really want to grow their practice and scale, an indicator I say to them is, if you could step away from your practice for a month and it wouldn't completely fall apart, that's a good sign that your systems are really supporting what you want to do with the practice. Whereas if everything's held together by you, then that's probably a big problem. And so if you're looking at eventually selling your business, or if you're looking at stepping away for a period of time, or even just having a life outside of your business, you really got to have those systems in place. And so I'm excited that the process is day 3 of this course we're doing here.
Yeah, I love process. It's fun.
Well, and real quick, why do you love process? Because lots of people would think process and say, that does not sound fun to me.
Well, I'm not sure why I love it, but I think it's just seeing a problem and recognizing that it's a problem, and then coming up with a solution, implementing that solution, and then reevaluating, and then just continuing to change it. I always tell people that if you are someone that likes things done the same way all the time, forever and ever, you would hate working for me, because if I find something better and it's going to make everyone's life better, I will work through that transition period to get there. And maybe that's what it is just seeing a different approach and seeing it work and just feel fulfilled from it.
Yeah, I think back to when Christina and I first got married, we did Dave Ramsey's approach to kind of financial peace, and to have a process that brought us on the same page, and to just be able to say, okay, she has been raised with not necessarily saving money in the same way I've been raised, but now we have a process that we go back to that process and say, okay, what's the process tell us to do to pay off this debt? And for us, that was really helpful for our marriage. And I think that that's just one of those kind of real life indicators of when you have a process that defines it, it makes it so much easier to not have to use that mental space to decide what you need to do next.
Exactly. And that's where your effectiveness and your efficiency comes into play.
Yeah.
To where things just become automatic and you're doing them without thinking, and you don't even realize that there's a bigger system in place. You're just doing them because that's the process. That's what we try to do here.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's number 4?
Number 4 is profit. And this is really looking at your numbers. And it's not just about the dollar, but more just about numbers in your company, your top line revenue versus your gross profit margins, your net profit margins, looking at your profit and loss statement, looking at your budget, and really learning how to convert everything into a percentage-based way of thinking. Because when you're looking at scaling a practice, if you get locked into a dollar amount, like, well, I'm going to spend, I don't know, $100 a month on marketing. And next month, if you hire 10 new clinicians, you've already blown your budget. So your budget really needs to convert over to a percentage-based model. And that's really the biggest piece of the profit category.
Yeah, so we'll kind of go into on day 4 what that looks like in regards to if a percentage of your marketing, equals this, then how do you figure out then how to scale that way?
Right.
Awesome. And then what's number 5?
Number 5 is the people. And that one I saved for last because this was a personal mistake that I made. And it was, I think, a valuable learning experience. And so finding people that support all your other 4 Ps, finding people that support your purpose and that are team players, and that are willing and excited to be participants in your process, people that are hungry for growth, and those that really share your perspective in the field. If you start trying to hire massively too soon, you're really going to throw a wrench in everything, because if you don't have a clearly identified process and you've not planned and you don't know your numbers, bringing on more people just can actually make it a bigger problem than a good thing. So I leave people for last, because when you do bring people on, you want everything else to be running smoothly. You want them to walk into something and they feel like, wow, this is awesome. These people have their crap together.
Yeah.
And so that people is my last one, and maybe among the most important.
Yeah. So we've got purpose, planning, process, profit, and people.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's where we're headed, folks, over the next 5 days. So let's dive into purpose. What do clinicians need to consider when it comes to starting with purpose?
Okay. Well, really just why. So, if I turn the tables back on you and said, why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, I do.
Look at you turning the tables. Next thing you're going to have a podcast takeover.
Take over your podcast.
I love it. Just like Allison did. So for my why, I've been listening to Simon Sinek's Start with Why recently, and been thinking, why does Practice to the Practice exist? And I think at our core, it's giving people their lives back. So it's that you don't have to work in that nonprofit if you don't want to. You don't have to work 50 or 60 hours a week. You don't have to take that supervisor job to make $60,000. That there's ways that you can have a lifestyle, you can have big ideas that change the world and a practice. And then also through that, we're helping the clients get their lives back. That by serving more clinicians, we're then helping there be more people that are starting practices and growing practices. So then I've kind of sorted through, well, then how do we do that? Well, we help people start, grow, and scale private practices. But also, we help people launch their really big ideas, whether that's a podcast or e-course or speaking or consulting. So yeah, I think right now my working thing is helping people get their lives back.
Yeah. And that's a great why. It's simple. It's straightforward. It tells people exactly what your purpose is. And, for us, our tagline in the company is using knowledge to empower. And I really, truly believe that sometimes people will accept what's given to them because they don't know that there's a better option, or they show up at their 9-to-5 job because that's what they think they have to do. And so whether it's a client or a clinician or a staff member, giving them the knowledge that they can use to empower and change their own lives, I think is a big why for us. And whether that be providing the most innovative and progressive services that we can provide in Somerset, Kentucky, then I'll take it. Whatever we need to do to help people be better and feel empowered. So a lot of purpose is just really finding your why, and not the superficial why that,
I want to change the world. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a good thing. But so
Yeah.
if somebody says, I think that my purpose right now is to pay off my student loan debt, how would you challenge them to really think through a deeper purpose if you were, say, consulting with them?
Okay. Well, one of the things that I use in my clinical life, I primarily focus on anxiety and panic disorders, and I use a lot of Dr. David Burns' techniques, and specifically his downward arrow technique. So to me, when someone says that, it would almost be like, that's not truly what their purpose is. That's just something, that leads to a bigger something. And so just getting to the main reason that why is paying this debt off so important to you? Is it just having something hanging over your head that you owe? Maybe you grew up with parents that didn't believe in debt, and I don't know, really just trying to find out what the deeper meaning there is. Is it liberation? Is it a sense of achievement? Is it going to help your pride? What is it? And then let's try to find other things that can help support that same goal in a more fulfilling way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think one activity that's been helpful for my consulting clients and some of the mastermind groups too is to think back when you were a child. What were jobs that you were interested in or things that you were drawn to? And then looking at jobs or volunteer activities or experiences that really lit you up, that you really were excited by? And so for myself, I think about when I was a kid, I remember my first jobs, I wanted to be, we lived by a train track. And so I wanted to be a train engineer at night because we saw trains go by at night. And I thought that's the only time trains ran. And during the day, I was going to be an actor and I wasn't going to sleep because I was a kid and I thought sleeping was stupid. But like, even in that, you know, the idea of acting, of, you know, giving people joy, of performing, of, you know, thinking through big ideas. And then when I think about in my like late teens or 20s, I did a ton of travel. You know, I went to Europe for 6 weeks on my own and just kind of went from hostel to hostel. And so there's also this sense of adventure and innovation and seeing how other people think, that they're all threads that now are part of practice of the practice. That it's not just this kind of typical, like, I'm going to teach you to make money so that you can, you know, buy your next fancy car, but that there's this purpose that's a part of it. There's this authenticity, and also that we get to do this awesome adventure of creating a practice or launching big ideas. And so I think when people go back to, like, over your lifetime, what's your purpose? When have you been lit up? When have you felt inspired? Oftentimes you can then pull out and say, well, now how does this apply to your practice? How does this apply to what you want to do now?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point about going back and looking at what your passions were when you were a child. I'm not sure why this came into my mind, but whenever I was in middle school, I had a teacher, and her name was Lori Carter. And it's funny because she's a friend now, and I tortured her. I was she
How
went
did
to
you torture her? I want to hear a good story here.
no, this is bad. I was in the beta club, and she took us on this school trip, and all the beta people, you know, went. We were
What's
all
the
in middle
beta
school.
club?
It was just like you had to have certain grades to get in. It's supposed to be the best of the best.
Like an honor society kind of
Yeah,
thing?
kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
So she takes us 2.5 hours away from our family for several nights to stay at this big hotel in Louisville, and she was going to make sure that we didn't sneak out of our rooms at night. So she taped our doors from the outside. Well, I mean, of course I get out and figure out how to get the tape back on, and, you know, like yelling at people walking down the hall, hey, can you put the tape back on my door? Anyway, she called all of our parents in the middle of the night, and we all had to go home. But I remember talking to her a couple of years ago, and she was just laughing about that story. And she was just like, you were this little stubborn, eccentric, freckle-faced kid. And, you know, now if you walk into my practice, you're going to kind of see some of that, because we are different and we are quirky and we do odd things. And that's really that's who we are. And we embrace that. And I mean, you'll see it in our staff. We don't have the stereotypical, you know, not everyone's the same. Everyone's different. We embrace differences, and, you know, it all kind of falls back into my why, and my purpose is let's find who we are, and let's just really put that out there and say, hey, you might not like us, you might not like this, but this is who we are. And if you do, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting to see kind of how your adult personality comes out as a kid. Even just seeing my 6 and 3-year-old, I'm like, we're in for quite the ride.
Yes.
So when someone establishes their purpose, they establish their why, they're like, okay, I feel like I have at least a working purpose. It may not be where they land. How do they then translate that into their practice, into the culture? I mean, culture is such a buzzword that people hate in businesses, into their culture. I'll use that word for lack of better words, into their marketing, their social media. How does that become embedded into the business?
Well, you kind of read my mind. I'm pretty sure I did not
Excellent.
send you my notes.
You didn't? No,
I
I love
didn't.
when that
Okay.
happens.
Yeah, so that was my next thing. And it actually says, when you are looking at your company's branding, its message, its online presence, your why should be speaking to your market loud and clear. So yeah, so you incorporate that into everything, and it is just a reflection of who you are. So, you know, if you are passionate about marriages, and you are passionate about keeping families together, then say that. Make that your header on your flyers. Put that on t-shirts. You know, just be very, very deliberate about it, and then make sure that it all works together. And I don't have any wonderful, great advice on that, except we really embrace our branding and our message. And I remember back when I thought, do I even really need a website? Is this even really that important? Do people even go online? And almost every clinician that we interview, they talk about it when they come in, and they've already looked at who their team leader would be based on their area, and they know they've put faces with names, and they know our passion, and they know our mission and our message, and so they already kind of know before they come in, hey, is this a place I want to work? And in the beginning, we didn't really have that luxury because we had not established our why. And now it just seems that, we interviewed 3 people last week, sent 3 job offers, and had 3 job offers accepted. And I knew within the first 5 minutes of every one of those interviews that I was going to hire that person because they were just a perfect fit. And that's kind of when you know that your why is working.
So it sounds like your purpose then starts to define other parts of the business, especially the
Does.
people you end up bringing in.
Yes. Yeah. So then, whenever you have people that are all very like-minded, it cuts down on the HR issues. It cuts down on the drama. There's just not as much of that when you have a bunch of people that are all in it for the same purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So what else do we have to cover with purpose before we move on to your planning phase?
That's it. That's
all right. Cool. Well, you nailed it.
Yeah.
So this is the first day of our $1 Million Practice series here with Kasey Compton. We are going to be launching a mastermind later on in the future here. It's going to be actually kicking off in July 2018. And if you hear this in the future, well, I hope we have flying cars and we've gone to Mars in the future. But if you hear that, you can apply for it over at practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Just a couple of the quick highlights of what we're covering. This is for people that have just established a practice. It could be just you, but you're already on some insurance panels. You've got some of your systems set up, but you want to be like Kasey. You want to have that $1 million practice. And so a couple aspects of this, you're going to get 2 days down at Kasey's practice with the rest of your mastermind group to really see all of her systems live. You'll get 2 days with me here in Traverse City where we're going to focus in on your marketing. Twice a month, we're going to have 90-minute mastermind meetings where Kasey teaches for 45 minutes, and then we have 2 hot seats. We're also going to have Q&A monthly with me, with your group of 12. You're going to have a private Facebook group. You're going to get text and phone support from Kasey. If you want to apply for that $1 Million Practice Mastermind, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/apply, and we would love to talk with you about whether or not you're a fit for that group of 12. Thanks so much for letting us into your ears and into your brain. We will talk to you tomorrow.